Hello and welcome back to Empyrion Galactic Survival. My name is Spanj, and in today's episode I'm going to take you guys through how to update an old build to the latest version of Empyrion. Now obviously this video might become less and less relevant as it becomes older, as the game is updated and things change, but I'm seeing a lot of people and a lot of requests for updated builds and questions about how to get old builds working in the latest version. So this video is really for a lot of you guys that are coming back to Empyrion after a long hiatus, or maybe you're just new to the game and you're wondering how these old workshop builds that you're picking up off the workshop are not working and why that is. So what I've got in front of me is an old build of mine. This is called the Nakiri. I really like this ship. Built it on a live stream once. Now this I have already updated to Alpha 12, or is very nearly finished the update for Alpha 12, the latest version, the current version, at the time of recording this. And just next to it here is the original. And you might notice that two things. First of all, the updated one is powered on, this one is not. And also there is some sort of subtle changes, like obviously the thrusters layouts are different and things like that, but otherwise the ships are largely the same. And they do have turrets deployed over there as well. Other than that, pretty much the same. So the good news is that the majority of old builds you can actually recover. Okay, they are not lost forever. Some of them will be, some of them on the ridiculous size and complexity, probably you won't be able to get into the new CPU system and the new flight mechanics and stuff like that. Now there is of course the advanced core. The advanced core is kind of like the golden gun approach to getting an old build to work. You could replace the current core with an advanced core in creative mode here and resave the blueprint. That will technically get it to work as is in the current version, but in a survival game these advanced cores can only be found in some POIs and patrol vessels, and you can only get them much later in the game. So you know, if you're looking to bring in that monster ship to get to end game, then you know you might struggle to actually find this advanced core, a bit like chicken and the egg situation. But yes, an advanced core will override all CPU requirements of a ship, and you know, you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about even changing it even slightly if you don't want to. Slap an advanced core in, off you go. But this is a very subjective video. It obviously depends on how you play the game, how you want to play the game, whether you turn CPU on, off, weights and volumes on, off. I'm going to assume everything is switched on. So CPU, weights and volumes, and obviously like I said, we're on Alpha 12.2 at the moment. So if you're watching this in Alpha 14, 15 or 372, it may not be relevant yet. Anyway, so old Nakiri here is not powered on because if we have a look at the control panel, we can see this new CPU efficiency and stats down here. We can see CPU efficiency 0%. It physically cannot turn the power on because it is 3.5 million points of CPU usage out of a maximum allocation of 200,000, somewhat over the limit. Let's go to CPU statistics up here, and we can have a little breakdown of the whole CPU system. So we can see that actually 2.625 million of that points allocation is in RCS alone. This is probably the first thing that you'll notice when you bring an old build in to try and diagnose or trying to update it for the latest version. RCSs are the #1 culprit of why you'll be so far over CPU. The other reason is, of course, you know, it's only got a core in it. It's not got any of the new extenders that will bring up, you know, its allocation. If we took this to a tier 4 instantly, it would instantly work. But it also would just be having a load of RCSs in there for no real reason. There is a way to get this down a lot further into CPU and still perform reasonably well. And that's what we're going to do today. Okay, so secondly, I want to think, before I start any updates, I want to think about what the Nakiri and what its purpose is. Well, the Nakiri for me is a sort of early to mid-game vessel. She's not a combat vessel, but she's great at exploring. She's got production, she's got hangar space, she's got storage, all the survival requirements, food growth, medical. Okay, so she's really good at just getting around, but not necessarily very good at taking on tough POIs, going into combat and things like that. So I think personally that the Nakiri sits around about tier 2, tier 3. She's definitely not tier 4, because at tier 4 I'm fully expecting a fully armed kind of battleship kind of thing, kind of like the Naginata over there, that's got all the guns, everything, and is within CPU. So you could do that kind of ship at tier 4 and something like this at tier 3. That's me, that's my opinion, and that's what I'm going to go with. So for this, the CPU jumps are a bit pathetic, so I think, to be honest, I'll be happy if I can get her within tier 3. Considering the size of the ship, the hangar space alone, I think tier 3 is a reasonable step. So, with that in mind, and we know that RCSs are a problem, so the first thing we're going to do is turn on some symmetry mode here. Let's get our N menu out, symmetry on the YZ. Okay, symmetry mode enabled. Let's just sort of God mode into the hull here and have a look around, because down here somewhere, there we go, are a ton of RCSs. Now, in older builds, RCSs were very common. They were required in order to allow the ship to turn, yaw, and pitch. We can now get rid of these, and just like that, you can see the power has just come on. Because now that we've removed all these RCSs, suddenly this thing is not so bad. It's still at 0% efficiency, but it's not so much overwhelming the efficiency that it can't turn the power on. We can also see that our power usage is at 1000%. So it's drawing way too much power, and that is as a result of the CPU efficiency. These generators are running at such low efficiency that they're being overwhelmed. Fortunately, we're in creative mode. They're not going to explode. If you're doing this in survival mode, they would have exploded by now. That's right, generators that are being overused, overrun, will now explode. If you didn't realize, that is an addition to Alpha 12 as well. So bear that in mind. Best to do this sort of thing in creative mode. I know you purists out there like to do these sort of things in survival mode, but it's probably safer if you do it in creative. You're not going to experience sudden explosions going on in the ship. Okay, so the other thing that I did with the Nikiri especially is I just covered it in thrusters. As you can see, there's just thrusters everywhere. There are thrusters all the way along here. The thrusters stuffed in the nacelles all the way along the top of the ship, all the way along the bottom of the ship as well. Now, some of these thrusters have a purpose, a very distinct purpose. So these ones on the bottom are obviously required in order to lift the ship, especially considering it's got two 320,000 storage bins. 320,000 volume is the highest you could go, so you can put a lot of very heavy stuff in these storage bins up here, and then when you put a lot of very heavy stuff in a ship, and especially now considering that docked vessels also contribute to a ship's mass, you're going to need lifting thrusters. So take into account what's practical. Lifting thrusters are practical, and what's just visual. That many reverse thrusters are just sort of visual. That many down thrusters are just visual. So maybe we can remove a lot of these and replace them with a sort of more efficient layout. And it does unfortunately mean that some of the maybe aesthetics that you possibly built into an older blueprint around things like thrusters and such will be lost, or you will have to adjust in order to get the right sort of visual effect back. That's just an unfortunate consequence of this CPU system and where it's going and what it's doing and stuff. So I'm going to get rid of a bunch of thrusters here, okay, and we're going to see a big difference. I think I'm going to leave these two rows here. I think because ultimately I'm going to need some anyway. So thruster F, that's fine. I think if I mitigate that with some mediums, we should get really good lift. And a better CPU efficiency. So I've got some spare hull here that I can eat into, not that one, but this one here. I can eat into an extra block, those two there. That one actually comes out within the thruster housing itself, whereas the other two seem to come out, I think, behind this block here, which is very close to an internal corridor. So actually, that's a bad idea. Thruster heat and generator heat as well actually now have a much bigger radius of effect. You should definitely take that into consideration, especially when considering the inside of your vessel. So I'm going to spread these two thrusters out a little bit more, and that thruster is going to be near this console here, which is potentially going to create heat issues in this room. But there are already massive heat issues in this room. In fact, I think I put LCD warnings in this particular section because there are warning signs everywhere. So the heat is very much considered. I've got these warning signs on the floor, and so if I walk past here, I should be fine. But notice how I step anywhere near that thruster that we just placed, the temperature goes up to 892 degrees. You can see that in the top right corner now. So actually, thrusters in this location are completely and utterly pointless. Let's take that out. And actually, if that one there is going to be close to this, so if I stand here, 800 degrees, this is the sort of temperature that will kill you very quickly. So, you know, these thrusters are done. We can't use them anymore. So we're going to have to use just these ones over here, right? Can we shoehorn those medium thrusters into this space instead? I think we can, because actually if we look through the hull, the nearest place to stand is over a block away. Of course we can test it, so let's place our thrusters and then go and stand above them by this constructor. Our temperature is fine. We're okay. So those thrusters are okay. That's the best we can do. Now we've obviously still got that line of smalls there. Now I suspect what I'll do is I'll program signal logic at some point to just use those small ones in normal operation, and then turn on the mediums if we need an extra bit of kit to lift it up. Now to the front, obviously we had a bunch of thrusters in the front and a bunch in the back. The more efficient use of CPU is to use larger thrusters and fewer of them, okay, rather than smaller thrusters and more of them. You get a better return of CPU points by using a medium thruster over two small thrusters. And you can sort of check this in the item menu, because you can see in each thruster what the CPU points are. So 13,340 for every medium thruster. Now it's 5,336 for every small thruster. But Spanj, that equals less than, two of those equals less than one medium. Yes, but the force is different. So the equal force, you know, you've got 7.2 compared to 18.1. So in order to get the equivalent amount of energy out of small, you'd actually probably need 3 or 2 and a bit, basically. So that's where the more efficiency comes in. So where we had, like, I don't know however many small thrusters we had back here, if we replace that with just 4 mediums, let's get rid of these light blocks. 4 mediums back here, we've got a way more sort of, we've got a better CPU efficiency and more power. And we can do the same around the back, a different orientation. And then of course if we use combination of texturing and lighting, we can get the same effect back here that we had before. The sides, again, I need less thrusters, so let me just put 2 here, and I'm going to put 2 at the front-ish area. So what I've done here with the side ones is I've spread them out. In fact, that's the best way to do all of the thrusters, if at all possible, and it greatly depends on the shape of the ship, of course. But if you can spread out your thruster grouping as much as possible, then you're going to get the best return of performance from these thrusters, because these thrusters are now responsible for actually turning the ship, doing roll and pitch, not so much RCS. RCS is now more of a supplement to your thrusters. And they're much more expensive to use because the game and the developers want to encourage you to use thruster placement in order to sort of try and focus your ship design and reduce its size and overall sort of performance impact on the game and stuff. So thruster placement now is quite important to how your ship performs. These side thrusters will be responsible for turning the ship. Having them spread out at the back and the front like this will mean that I will get the best possible return in performance to CPU ratio, and of course power and such. So if possible, do spread out your thrusters as best as you can. Obviously I've got a limited spread on the bottom here, which is going to affect my pitch, and we'll see that probably in the performance later. Now, actually saying that, I've got some more at the front here, smalls. I could have taken them out, but maybe I'll leave them for now because they will help with the pitch of the ship. Saying that, downward thrusters is another issue. We've obviously got a long line of smalls all the way along top of the hull here. from a design point of view and aesthetics point of view, there's limited areas on this ship where I could put or spread out these thrusters without having a kind of negative impact on the aesthetics, and I really want to keep that. So I'm going to leave them as is for now and hope that I can get it within tier 3 without having to change those thrusters, which I think I can do because I've now placed all the thrusters that I think I'm going to need. Let's have a quick check of CPU, and we're at 1 million. Actually, we're doing very well. 1.5 is the limit. So we've still got plenty of CPU to play with, but we do have some new devices that we want to add into the ship because we've had some new updates. Shields, they've been around for a little while now, but the Nakiri was built before shields were a thing. So let's see if we can get those in. We've already got a warp drive and a warp drive tank, but the shield generator, as you probably know, is enormous. And, well, I'm not really sure where I'm going to put this thing because this hangar bay is enormous. And so we're probably going to have to do a significant redesign of the warp drive and so on and so forth in order to get this nice new device in. We also want a detector as well. And all the while we're adding this stuff, we need to keep an eye on our CPU allocation. I do not want to go over 1.5 and keep it within tier 3. Bearing in mind as well that the lower in CPU that you are within a certain tier, then the more benefits you get. At the moment, at 1 million, assuming we put in our tier 3 extenders, of course, we'll actually be getting a buff to performance and efficiency of things like generators and so on and so forth, constructors and whatnot. So bear that in mind as well. It's not always practical to ride the limit of the CPU tier. If you can get it under by a significant way, then there is a benefit to that. On top of that, the Nakiri, I need to rearrange the garden here so it's in an actual 9-plot configuration rather than this weird 8-plot configuration on both sides. Simple little efficiency changes like that would go a long way to the ship's actual use. Oxygen has changed as well, so I don't know if I've actually got oxygen switched on. I do not. Let's fill up the tanks quickly because I want to show you. Now, previously, there we go. Previously, oxygen would not go down these little tunnels. Now it will, and that will change how oxygen works in quite a lot of older builds where you had things like half blocks. So this little corridor is actually made of the L-shape kind of wall block, as you can see. And now oxygen never used to go down here. It used to actually, you'd have to run down here before you started suffocating. But just bearing that in mind as well, the half blocks are no longer airtight. So if you're using half blocks to perhaps create some kind of effect visually or whatever in your old build, you might now have just sprung a leak. So bear that in mind, use the nice little oxygen tool to help you out there. Another thing that costs a lot of CPU is constructors, and you can see that again in the CPU statistics. We can see constructor, we've got 6 of them, they're equaling a whopping 80,000 between them. So if you are struggling just at the edge of a CPU tier, maybe consider reducing from 4 constructors to just 2, or swapping out 2 large constructors for 2 small constructors. You know, think about how you're actually going to use the ship. Are you really going to be using 4 large constructors simultaneously? And if yes, can the jobs of 2 of those constructors be done in a small constructor, which costs a lot less CPU and power? If you're using a really old ship and it actually comes with containers rather than the new container controllers and extensions, each container will cost a number of CPU, and obviously they can only go up to a maximum of 16,000. I think if you use one of the bigger ones, 16,000 volume. If you need more volume, which I strongly advise you do, then you might want to swap out all your containers, or a lot of them, for the new extensions and container controllers. That way you can get up to 320,000. But bear in mind, the more container extensions you add, the more CPU it costs. Here we can see costing almost 80,000, as much as constructors, in just container extensions. And that is just 2 full-size containers in this ship, so they are quite expensive. But once you've done your sort of updates and you've changed the thrusters around, removed your RCSs, and added anything else in that you want, you should be able to get your ship at a nice level of CPU. I'm not going to be able to get it down to tier 2 because I'd need to chop off 500,000, which according to the stats would be pretty much all of its thrusters. It kind of negates the whole point of having a CV. So we're going to stick to tier 3 on the old Nakiri here. I have also managed to fit in a shield generator and warp drive, and I've also made some nice use of the new blast doors. There are a lot of new blocks and stuff in Empyrion if you haven't played for a while. These blast doors are nice, heavy and chunky, and they look pretty good in a full-sized wall. Nice little access for things that you wouldn't normally go into. Also remember that you'll need your CPU extensions. Didn't cover these before, but CPU extensions come in 3 brands at the moment. You've got your tier 2, which you will need just 1 of, your tier 3, which you will need 2 of, and your tier 4, which you will need 4 of. This ship being tier 3, I have added 2 of these CPU tier 3 extenders in here, which of course means that my ship is now 1.5 million CPU points and registered as tier 3. So I've completely redesigned the whole warp drive area. Warp drive is actually off to the side, the shield generator is off to the other side, and the CPU extensions sit in the middle. I've used some piping and some bright colors and stuff like that to decorate it as a kind of, you know, big sort of engineering-y kind of section. And I've used the sort of blast doors either side to kind of mark off the area and regard it as something that you would only really access if you need to do some repairs. Still a work in progress, I've got a bit more texturing to do to make it ready, but it's coming along nicely. I've also made some use of the new LCD projectors in order to add some nice graphics into areas like this engineering section, which is a dangerous place to be because of all the heat dangers, such as being next to these generators, all those thrusters, etc. So LCDs, if you haven't seen, come with a whole new projector block, which allows you to place LCD stuff pretty much anywhere in a ship, using a lot of the offsets and rotations and stuff like that. They now come with a bunch of default symbols and logos and stuff that you can enjoy and make your ship look even prettier with. Yeah, so I put those there. I should put probably another one over this window saying caution or whatever. But other than that, the only other thing that I've done is add some small constructors here, rearrange these container extensions, put some survival stuff like the new armor lockers and things down here. To our little oxygen tunnel, we've rearranged the garden pot into a 9 plot, so we only need 1 grow light. And I've rearranged the bridge upstairs just as a point kind of to make it a little bit more efficient and stuff. I did have a problem with the Nikiri. With this particular cockpit, it puts the camera quite high above where you actually are in the cockpit. So in the old model, your head would glitch through the ceiling. Now I've sort of created a larger front window, and you now actually see over it quite nicely. Like I said, still work in progress. I need to do some more bits and bobs to it before I update it onto the workshop. But this ship is now updated and ready for Alpha 12. It will now work at Tier 3, 1 million CPU allocation. It has the capability of lifting quite heavy loads. Can't really see in space, but it does say it's cargo lift of 65 kilotons. Considering the ship weighs 4 kilotons, that's pretty good. It can lift many times its own weight, so happy days. That is in space though, so that number may change and will change actually if you're in gravity. But anyway, in the end, your old sort of build should now be ready for the current version of Empyrion. If you can get that within the CPU limits. Like I said, the main things is to consider your thruster placement, strip out the RCSs. If we take this for a quick spin actually, we should see that it's got no RCSs in there. Quick check on the groups. Oh, I beg your pardon, it's got 1 RCS. Somewhere in there I've left 1 RCS in. But as you can see, the ship still turns, it rotates, it moves. And it's probably not, just to manage your expectations, probably not going to maneuver as quickly as it did before when it was using RCSs. It is going to be a bit of a downgrade, but this is ultimately the purpose behind these kind of updates is to make these ships more utilitarian, purpose-driven and stuff like that, not to shut them down completely. But if you've got a 96 kiloton capital vessel maneuvering like an SV, then that's a problem. So there we go. That's how you get an old build updated for the latest version. It's not too difficult to do. It's a little bit labor intensive. All the new sort of LCD and signal logic stuff take a lot more time in build if you add that sort of stuff to your build. The actual updating it to make it work, that's a case of remove those RCSs, rearrange those thrusters, and put in those CPU extenders, and off you go. You're going to notice performance decrease, like I said, probably, but that's part of the game now. You've got to think about, I think, the purpose of the CB. The jack of all trades ships, they can still exist, they still do. My Naginata here is very much a jack of all trades. She'll pretty much destroy anything she sees, but she also carries a ridiculous amount of cargo. So we can see here 5 KSU, 320,000 storage volts, so more storage than you could shake a stick at. Huge garden, all power sort of capabilities, all the mod cons, shield generator, and did I mention armed to the teeth as well. And this is a tier 4 vessel. So yes, okay, you might not be able to get in the absolute monolith kind of CVs that you may want to, but you can still get something in that is extremely powerful within the CPU limits. It's a challenge, and it's actually quite a fun one in my opinion. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video useful and informative. Let me know down in the comments any other tips you might have for new players or returning players around whole new mechanics of Alpha 12, and let's help each other out. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Till then, take care. Bye bye.